1 in 10 people expected to develop Alzheimer's. I want to bring into the conversation gerontologist and author Sherri Snelling, because this whole concept of how we're interacting and reacting to individuals who have Alzheimer's, loved ones who have Alzheimer's, is so very important.
Absolutely. Not enough people really understand this disease. You mentioned that there is no cure. We certainly know that there are no effective long-term treatments. So how do we cope when we have a loved one who's diagnosed? We know the diagnosis is for the whole family. So when I talk about Alzheimer's with folks, I say, there's 3 E's. The first E is emotion. It's going to be a real emotional journey. You need to understand what those emotions mean and how do you cope with those for your loved one? How does the loved one who's been diagnosed cope with the fact that they are going to lose that memory? The second thing is really education. We need to educate our healthcare professionals to really understand this disease better. And then thirdly, how do we have empathy? And I think that's the important thing. We can understand the statistics, we can understand and read things, but really putting yourself in the shoes of someone with the disease, as Carrie has done, is going to really give you that patience that you need when someone asks the same question over and over within the space of 2 minutes, when they start panicking because they're sundowning, which is a very similar, something that a lot of Alzheimer's patients get. So what we have to do is really have that empathy. So that's really important, I think.
Can you explain to people who aren't familiar with the term sundowning what you're referring to?
Sure. So for many of you, you've probably seen the movie The Notebook. And so if you remember that scene where Gina Rowlands at the end of the movie is, they're having this nice, quiet, romantic dinner, and then all of a sudden it's sundown, actual dusk, and she starts to get very agitated. She starts to lash out physically. She starts to cry and starts to scream. That is very typical of sundowning. And so about 70% of Alzheimer's patients sundown, and it happens at dusk.
So I think one thing, though, there's an aspect of normal age-related memory loss. It changes. How do you know when it is something serious, like Alzheimer's, versus just normal age-related change?
Sure. So a couple of things that they need to understand is that the brain is atrophying. So the cells within the brain are actually dying. And so what does that mean? So if you think of your brain as a computer, and we all know that computers have RAM to hold memory and also processing speed. So as we age, what we find is we're adding all these files into our brain, all these memories, all these things that we're learning are getting into our brain as a file. But as we age, normal aging is, okay, you've got millions and millions of files up there. You have to sift through them in order to find the right file. So something normal would be, I misplaced my keys. What's not normal with Alzheimer's is you've put your keys in the freezer. And so it's because that file is missing. And all of a sudden, it's not just memory loss, it's the fact that someone we've been married to for 40 years, we don't recognize anymore. We look in the mirror and we see an older person and we say, who is that person? And then the language, the communication stops, because I can say something like, I feel really hippo today. And you're all gonna look at me and say, what did she just say? And you start to get that as the patient, you start to withdraw. You start to then socially isolate yourself because you know something's wrong, so.
And Sherri, I find this particularly powerful that if you caught somebody early, at least you could warn them to a certain extent that you're gonna have some changes, and these are examples of what you're going to feel. I think that would help mitigate the fear factor, which I think so many people going through Alzheimer's have. They're just scared.
Family planning, both financially and emotionally, becomes really critical.
And so let's say you're at the cusp of that. How do you navigate that as a caregiver for someone who's losing their memory or in the early stages of Alzheimer's?
You have to educate yourself specifically about what does it mean if somebody starts sundowning, and when does that happen? It's usually in the late middle stage, or they're gonna wander, and they might get lost. And so now there's a new technology that can help with that GPS tracking and all that. But all those conversations and that kind of preparedness needs to happen early. So it really is something that's very important for us to look at.
So still so much to learn about Alzheimer's, but I want to commend you, Carrie, for your stewardship of this type of thing so we can all empathize, understand more, and just keep up the great work.